Thank you so much for joining me, Cooper. I would love for you to take me through your life story from your earliest memory all the way till present day.
Wow, thank you guys so much for having me. It's quite cool to be able to sit in my home where I grew up in. My parents still live in this home. I've moved out about 6 years ago. I live on the Gold Coast now, but yeah, right now we're sitting in my backyard where my mum and dad still live, and I've got more memories in this house than anywhere before. So let's go back to the start and go on a bit of a journey. I was born in Mona Vale Hospital, just down the road from here on in Narrabeen. Grown up in this beautiful house here in Narrabeen. When we first were here, it was a little two-story house. There wasn't like a carport out the front of where we live, or anywhere to park even. And some of my earliest memories is having an older sister, Chloe. She's been awesome my whole life. And then my little sister, my first little sister, came along, Olivia, when I was about 3 years old. And then my youngest sister, Sophia, came when I was about 6 years old. But maybe we'll start with when I was 6 years old. Also, for anyone listening, I very luckily just wrote a book, and it was kind of me chronologically going through my story. So I kind of have a bit of reflective knowledge of my past at the moment. So yeah, when I was 6, it was a very interesting year for me. The year 2000 in Australia was pretty special, especially living in Sydney, living on the northern beaches, about 30 minutes away from the Olympics. So some of my earliest memories are standing at the front of my house, right where we are right now, with my older sister, Chloe, me, and my mum and dad. I think my two younger sisters were being babysat by grandma and papa, and face covered in green and gold tattoos, going to watch the Olympics. And I can't remember too much of it, but I was about 6 years. Well, I was 6 years old when that happened, and yeah, I just remember like seeing all around me just Olympics. It's the biggest sporting event on the globe, and to have it 30 minutes from your house when you're 6 years old was such a cool moment. And I think it was a big starting point for me to want to be an athlete, to see all these superhumans doing what they did best, and so many people like admiring them. My parents, my friends' parents at school would all be dressing up as our favorite athlete and the mascots. Like, yeah, that was some of my earliest memories. And yeah, I still have a photo where I'm standing out the front of the house here before we went to the Olympics. But another thing that was pretty important, and one of probably my earliest memories, was sitting downstairs in the rumpus room from where we're sitting right now. Pretty sure I was playing some sort of video game, probably like Nintendo 64 or something. And my dad walked down the stairs, and he looked like really upset, and I couldn't really work out what was going on. And I was only 6 at this stage, so he definitely didn't tell me what happened, but he just let me know that his youngest brother had passed away, Michael, and I'd never actually met him. And it's quite fitting. He was 31 years old, I'm pretty sure, which is my age right now. So yeah, at the time he didn't tell me, but it was suicide. So that was kind of two things that were kind of big catalysts to my life, I guess I call it. And because, I just wrote my book, I really reflected on these times in my life. And at the stage, I probably didn't know how big of a moments they were. But, I traveled the world, which I'll go through shortly, as a professional athlete. And now I run a mental health organization. So these two big moments, I guess, really shaped my life at 6 years old. But then primary school, I went to primary school right down the road from where we are right now, literally less than a kilometre, at Narrabeen North Primary School, which was an awesome primary school. I just remember my parents becoming quite close friends with my older sister's friends, probably a little bit more parents. My older sister, Chloe, her best friend in primary school was Laura Enevar, who's a world junior champion surfer. They live literally, you can almost see their house over our back fence. So very tight-knit community was what I sort of remember growing up. What else? Nippers was a big part of my life. North Narrabeen is a beach that is very well renowned for professional surfing. But my dad is also a mad surfer. He surfs every day. I got to go for a surf with him today, which was really cool. He's like in his 60s now, but still surfs every day. And I remember when I was quite young, would go to Longreef Beach, which is down the road from here, and my dad would do board riders down there, which in Australia, surfing culture is massive, and my dad would do board riders. I remember going to Longreef, and I'd ride the billy cart. So I'd have a billy cart race every year, and it was like a thing for all the older boys and all the teenagers and everyone to, get on the piss and have like a bit of a fun day. But they'd have this billy cart race on down the hill at Longreef, which I don't think hasn't happened for a long time. But I remember as a kid watching my dad and his mates do that, because he would have been, in his mid to late 30s at this stage, only a few years older than me now, which is quite nice to reflect on. But then we were living in Narrabeen, so he would surf at Narrabeen, and he signed me up to North Narrabeen Nippers. So I remember our white cap for Narrabeen Nippers was always my cap, but my dad and my mum were big beach goers, so they were always really, really loved us to have ocean knowledge, I guess, to be safe down the beach. So I got put in Nippers. Like, my dad never pushed me into surfing from like that 2, 3, 5-year-old age. Like, watching my brother-in-law Fisher take my little niece Bobby, which we'll catch up to that part of the story later. Watching him take her surfing at like 1.5 years old, standing her up. You see kids like that all the time, and I don't have any photos or anything like that. I wasn't the like, oh, came out of the womb on a surfboard at all. But I remember like from about 5 years old doing Nippers. And Nippers was a big part of my life, you know, doing the flags and doing the weight. And I loved the board paddle once I was able to do that. And that was, I guess, what started me eventually getting into surfing. I remember probably about 7 or 8 years old. Would go on family holidays. Would go up to Foster a lot. Every school holidays would go with my grandparents to Foster to up to the Great Lakes region, which was epic. But then we'd go down to Manana down the south coast, and that's probably my earliest memories of surfing. But a big part of that sort of 5 to 12 year age of my life was rugby union, actually. I used to play in the Collaroy Cougars just down the road from here in Narrabeen, and we had a gun team. Some of my earliest memories as well is probably 5 years old. I started playing rugby union, and we just had one of those teams that was just like super talented, and I was, you know, probably in the top couple players in the team, but there was just a couple freakish, really fast kids in my team. And I remember winning like games like 100-0 every week. Like, we just used to smash teams. So I had this, like, I guess, competitive streak from a young age, like through the rugby, through being always the team that's winning, getting that external validation of like, oh, Cooper's team won again this weekend. You know, you hear your parents talking to their friends about, you know, how good you are. And that was an early moment of me not knowing, but at the time subconsciously really seeking external validation and seeking my parents talking highly of me. And obviously now I know my love from them is completely unconditional, but at that time some unhealthy, I guess, thoughts started to come in of like, oh, when I do well, my parents like are talking about me is, you know, quite a cool thing. And then I got to like my late, I guess 9, 10, 11 years old, finished primary school, and I started really getting into my surfing. I got my first like sponsorship with surfing. I remember one of my footy team, one of the kids in my footy team's dad owned this company called Planet X, and he was getting into extreme sport, and he sponsored me at 10 years old, but he also owned an island in the Mentawais Islands, which is like the best place in the world to go surfing. And my dad's a draftsman, so he draws like on CAD air conditioning units into buildings, but he also designed our house and can do houses too. And the kid's dad who played in my footy team was like, hey, do you want to come to the Mentawais? We'll sponsor Cooper with Planet X, give him some clothes and stuff, buy him a surfboard, but we'll bring you over to the Mentawais and him so you can look at my island to help me design a resort to do there. So HT's in the Mentawais is like probably one of the best waves there. And my dad designed the resort there. So that was like a weird memory. At 10 years old, I was sponsored and got flown overseas to go surfing. Like, how cool is that? But then that brand wasn't really a surf brand. It was like kind of a big W clothing brand, super random. But anyway, so around 11, I got sponsored by Rip Curl. I was quite successful at a pretty early age in surfing. I, you know, found, I think maybe because of my nippers and my board paddling, I was always a really good paddler. I was super competitive because of my football. And then I just, yeah, found quite a quick progression in surfing. And yeah, once I was 11, got sponsored by Rip Curl. And sort of from like 11 till 16 in surfing in Australia, you travel on like the junior grommet tour. There's like under 12s, under 14s, under 16s. And from 10 years old, we were doing the under 12s and would pack up the red Tarago and mum and dad and the 3 sisters and the trailer on the back, and would drive to like, some of my earliest memories are going to Rusty Grom Fest at, used to be called the Rusty Grom Fest at Lennox Head. And my family doesn't come from, you know, much wealth at all, and would stay in the caravan park for the surf comp every year. And I remember like the second year we did it, I would have been 11, and that was like when I got sponsored by Rip Curl, and I was like so excited. And we're in the caravan park, and this big storm came over, and it was like going to be crazy. And my grandparents were very close with us, which I'll tell some stories about them later in the chat. But my grandparents would always come, and they'd stay in like a little hotel, like on the water, and would stay as a family in tents. And this storm came over when we were like 11, and we had to pack up all the stuff like super quickly. And like me and my 3 sisters and mum and dad all piled into this little 2-bedroom apartment with my grandma and pop for that surf comp. So that was kind of what our upbringing was like, hand-me-downs, trying our best to like get by. You know, my dad always says, like, I'd be like, oh, can I go get a Magnum? And he'd go get an Icy Pole. And I'd be like, stop being a scab. And he'd always be like, appreciation, not expectation, man. I got to not buy one Icy Pole. I got to buy 4 of them, and that's the price of a Magnum. So I kind of grew up on that, you know, motto of like, just try and be appreciative of what you got. But yeah, that was sort of my memories, I guess, up until I hit high school. What was high school like for me? High school was an interesting time, I guess, because I was like this quite successful kid. I was sponsored, I was getting this stuff. I started probably, if you asked a lot of the kids when I was in high school one word to describe me, I reckon the word I'd say would be cocky, which I look back and I'm, you know, embarrassed to share that, but that's probably just how I was. And maybe it comes from that little bit of, you know, I get this pat on the back when I'm doing well in my comps. You know, I'd have these sponsors, and I was probably in the top sort of 2-3 kids in Australia till I was about 20 for my age group. So I had probably a pretty inflated ego at that stage. But I enjoyed high school. I always enjoyed learning. I never was super smart, but I could always get by pretty well without having to work too hard. I was quite curious and like really enjoyed that. And probably a big moment in my high school years was winning an Australian title. So when I was 14, in the younger of the 2 years for the under 16 Australian titles, I think I'd won the state title that year as well in New South Wales. And then when you, in the new, every state takes a team to the Australian junior titles for surfing, and there's under 14s, 16s and 18s. My first year in the under 16s, it was at Margaret River, which is a very well-renowned wave. It's you know, been on the world tour many times. So to get to surf there as a junior in Australian titles was quite a privilege. And I probably wasn't the favourite. I had always this arch nemesis, Matt Banting, and his name will come up later in the story, but we were close friends all the way through our career because we were always in the finals day together. So me and him were kind of always neck and neck, but he's an incredible competitor and just like would always smash me. But this one year in Margaret River, the waves were really big, and I was quite comfortable in bigger waves from a young age. Just for whatever reason, maybe my board paddling and, you know, my background of nippers and being comfortable in the ocean. And it was really big this finals day. And I remember they just sent us out and they were like, you know, good luck out there, the under 16s. And I just had a good run on finals day and, you know, made the final and then surfed well in the final. And I won the under 16s Australian title when I was kind of 1 year younger than the division. I wasn't the older person in the division, which was really special because if you win the Australian title in the under 16s or under 18s back then, you qualified to surf for Australia at the World Junior Surfing Games. There's 4 males in the under 16s, 4 males in the under 18s, 4 in the women's 16s and 18s. They take 16 young Australian surfers, but 4 in your division. So top 4 in your 2 age groups, like pretty special. But the winner of the Aussie title gets an exemption and gets straight into the team. Then you do a training camp with the winner plus the 3 finalists get an automatic spot to the camp, and then they pick 4 wild cards who didn't make the Aussie titles final, the top 4, to go to this training camp. And it was so cutthroat. I remember it, where you do all this testing and heat drills, and then you go home, and then the coaches decide who the other 3 in the team are. So my first year was really cool because I was already in the team, so I just kind of got to enjoy and have this experience. And that first year I qualified, the world titles was in Ecuador. Which is, you know, I was a 14-year-old kid getting to travel to Ecuador and get green and gold to represent my country, and that was really special. And I remember when I won that Aussie title, I'll never forget, Margaret River, it's a big staircase to get down to the water's edge, and when you win a surf comp, it's kind of, what's the word, it's kind of, I can't think of the word, tradition to get carried up the stairs on people's shoulders. You get like chaired up. So I remember getting like chaired up the stairs with all my mates. Like, it was pretty cool. And then knowing I qualified for the team, which was like a massive deal for me at that stage. So yeah, they're like next year when I was like 5th, you know, I come home and out the front of the school, it says like, well done, Cooper, Australian champion. The cover of the local paper was Super Cooper. Like, I can understand why I had a bit of an ego back then and a bit of an inflated, you know, cockiness, but I wish I didn't in hindsight now that, you know, I'm a bit older and more mature, and I'm like, fuck, you don't need to have tickets on yourself. Like, anyway, so that was really cool. And so that was when I was 14. I went to Ecuador. I did okay at the World Juniors. I think I got like 15th or something. Actually, I'll give you a pretty funny story of... Maybe it's not a story I should share, but I'll give you a story that I've never really shared. I mean, maybe I shouldn't share this, but when I was like 15, we went to the ISA World Titles in Ecuador. We have an epic week. Team Australia wins the world title. So we go up on the stage, we all get a gold medal as a team because like our 18s boy Dean Bowen won, and we had a successful team effort. So we all won, were world champions, like so cool. But we weren't allowed to party on the last night because we had to fly home that night. So we all go back to the hotel and we've got to pack our bags real quick. And all the other teams in juniors are like, you know, it's Ecuador. It's a, you know, you can drink beers if you're 15 there. If you're, the team, it was a bit more lax as well. This is like 16 years ago. It's a bit different now. Everything's a bit more professional. But I remember like everyone's like getting on, having a beer or two. I was only like 15, so I was kind of like one of the younger ones. But where I grew up in Narrabeen, it's pretty big beer culture. So I remember like when I was 15 drinking beers already. So I was like, oh, if I could sneak a beer or two on the bus. And I remember the boys giving me a couple like long necks at the back of the bus on the 2-hour trip to the airport. And I remember like getting so pissed that I passed out on the bus, gold medal around my neck. And the boys all drew on my face with Posca. And it was gold Posca all over my face. I could find a photo somewhere of it. But I remember just being so drunk that I went to get off the bus and I just fell straight on my face, like off the bus, like I passed out. And luckily my dad was there, but he's probably pissed as well. My dad hasn't had a beer in 12 years. And like, this was like, I probably had a 3-year period where I'd had beers with my dad's, and he'll be the first to admit he had a bit of a problem with it. So, you know, so I just like remember getting off the bus, like, and they're like, we're not going to be able to get him on the plane. And they put me in a wheelchair, and all the rest of the team's gone to check in on the flight. I really don't know if I should tell this story. Maybe Surfing Australia will get in trouble. It's a long time ago. This is old Cooper. Anyway, so it's a fucking funny story though. So my dad has to take me through the airport in a wheelchair, carrying my board bag from the surf comp, and they're like telling everyone, oh, he's just like sick from the bus and stuff. And the team's like, if he's not all right in the next hour, he's not gonna be able to get on this flight. You're gonna have to stay in Ecuador with him until you can get another flight. So I remember getting wheeled into like the hospital in the airport. There's all like medical wings in airports. And it's so weird. I've never had this experience before, but I remember going like, I just need to like sleep for a second. And I remember like falling asleep, and I woke up, and my dad said I was asleep for about 10 minutes, and I woke up and I was fine. And I was like, what the hell? So eventually like we get the shit off my face. We go check in. I get on the plane and I start feeling not that good again. And I remember the plane takes off, and my mate next to me, it was this Matt Banting guy again that I thought should have beat me in the comp. He still made the team. And I was like, oh, I got to go to the bathroom. And I went to the bathroom, like an 8-hour flight from Ecuador to Chile we're flying. And he's like, I get a knock on the door of the bathroom. I've fallen asleep on the toilet in the thingo. And I was in there for like 6 hours, he said. And the host, he's knocked on the door, and I was like, holy shit, I like passed out in the bathroom. And then end up sitting back down, land in Chile. The team and a few people go check out Chile for the day, and I just stayed in the airport with a bunch of us who were hungover. And then, yeah, we fly home, and yeah, that was my Ecuador first world title trip. That's the story I haven't told. I mean, I definitely, you know, do not encourage people drinking underage, but that was just, you know, 16 years ago. The culture was a little bit different, and surf culture with alcohol was a little bit lax. But anyway, that was my first world title experience. What else are some cool stories from back then? And I mean, Surfing Australia were definitely not okay with it. And to be honest, they probably didn't even know. We kind of like, I got out of it with a few cheeky lies. But then I made the team for that ISA Australia team for the next 3 years, which is pretty special. I don't think anyone in my age group ever made all 4 of the teams. Like, might have missed 1 year, but I got to go to Ecuador the first year, Peru the second year. That was my best year. I got 10th in the world when I was like 16 over in Peru. I then went to New Zealand, actually my second year was New Zealand, my third year was Peru, and my fourth year was Panama. Like, so cool to like go to all these countries through high school, you know, representing the country, the top in the country. So they were all some pretty cool big moments. And another thing that happened right after I won that Australian title was I changed sponsors from Rip Curl to Hurley, which at the time Hurley was like a big brand coming into the industry. It was kind of like backed by Nike. It was like this cool big movement. And when I won that Aussie title, they kind of headhunted me and moved over to Hurley, which, it was interesting. At the time, I had quite a good offer from Rip Curl, but I wasn't really happy with how I was being treated. Even though I was 16, like, who knows, at 15, I shouldn't have been getting treated anything. I should listen to my dad, like, appreciation, not expectation. But anyway, I had a pretty good Rip Curl deal on the table, but I was like, I'm not liking how I'm treated. Let's go with this new Hurley thing. And they were similar deals, but the Rip Curl one was like, if you are in the top 2 in the junior series, you get this like 120 grand contract, but I wasn't thinking in 3 years I'd be there. Turns out in that third year I got second in the junior series and would have got this big contract, and Hurley were like, nah, sorry, the industry's not like it was back then. They would have had to carry on the contract, but Hurley didn't. So I made a few interesting moves that probably financially could have been better with sponsorships throughout my days, but I had an epic couple of years with Hurley. I had like 7 years with them. And they supported me through, so much. I got to compete in World Juniors all around the world. What else is interesting about that period of my life? I finished school. It was a big thing for me to finish high school. My parents were like, look, other people who are in your position are dropping out and doing homeschooling so they can really focus on the surfing, but it's still going to be there in a couple of years. So once again, I was very lucky. My high school was literally at the bottom of my hill, so I'd literally ride my skateboard on my ass and I'd sit on it and go through that many pairs of shoes, grinding my feet down the hill. But yeah, school was good. I enjoyed it because I traveled so much with my surfing. I had this like kind of different friendships groups. None of my mates that I went to school with really surfed at all. I had like one best mate who was in like a year or two below that I surfed with, but other than that, I'd hang out with the mates in my year, but none of them surfed. Whereas I'd have like my pro surf mates who I'd go and compete with up and down the coast, each couple weekends. I'd have my beach crew at Narrabeen who were from kids of all different schools, older boys and stuff. And then I'd have my school crew. So socially, I was quite lucky, I guess, throughout my life that I've always kind of had quite a few different core groups. But as well, through that period of my life, through my teenage years, I watched my dad struggle a little bit with his mental health, bit of alcoholism. When I turned 18, he quit drinking and hasn't had a drink cold turkey in 12 years, which I'm so proud of him. But that was a moment where I kind of realized, maybe mental health might be a thing. I lost my uncle. I eventually, throughout my teen years, got told that my uncle had taken his own life and had seen my dad struggle. So I was always kind of like, maybe mental health will be something that I need to take care of. But I was also like, I'm getting paid to surf and travel the world. Who am I to complain about mental health? So I kind of, anytime I had any struggles, would just push them down and try and figure it out myself. And through that journey, I'd learn a lot of stuff. And then, I had a pretty cool, finishing school. I was getting paid to surf professionally already. I kind of knew my path was that. I got second in the junior series, which is like all the top Australasia surfers under 21. I got second in that when I was like 17. And, I was already trajectorying on my surf career. So when I finished school, I never really thought about uni or anything. It was like all in on surfing and doing sponsor trips with Hurley to like Indonesia, to America, doing photo shoots, traveling to all the events. And I kind of 2-timed the junior tour and the international qualifying tour. But I got 5th in World Juniors in Bali in Karamas. And if you get in the top 5 in World Juniors, back then you'd qualify as a seed into not the top qualifying tour, the second one. And I got into that, and if you do well in that, you then get into the top one. So I got like into the bottom qualifying tour quite quickly because of my World Junior seed. And then I had a really good first 6 months to the year, and I straight away got into like that top tour and pretty much stayed in this sort of like, pretty much ranked like 34th in the world to 134th in the world. I pretty much sat in that for a decade from there, from about 2017 to 27. I fluctuated. I had my first few years were probably my best once I got onto that tour. I, built into it. I got 5th in a big event over in Saquarema in Brazil, one of my first years, which was a really good thing that jumped me up like quite high into the ranking straight away. And then I kind of just like maintained a pretty good ranking. And my best year ever I had on the qualifying tour came with like quite an interesting end of the year. So I'd had like my best year. I got to the end of the year. I needed to make like one more heat in Hawaii to qualify for the tour. This time I was in like 21, so I was still young and like I've got plenty of years ahead of me. Don't make that final heat, but I'm like, sweet, I got 23rd on my tour. The top 14, I think that year qualified. So I'm like really close. And I get home, I'm speaking to my manager, and it was my contract year with Hurley. And that was when they came to me and said like, look, the industry is not in a really good place right now. We've had budget cuts, and unfortunately we're going to have to pull you from our international team to our domestic team. We're going to pull you from making $50,000 a year to $5 million. And it literally cost me like probably $60,000 to $70,000 a year to live the lifestyle I was living, traveling 9 months a year, having to, go to events and accommodation and travel and stuff. And at the time, my manager's like, it's all right, we'll find you another sponsor. You're in the top 55 surfers on the planet right now. You're in your prime age. and we just couldn't find a sponsor. So that was a weird moment for me of like, fuck, do I retire? I've got no funding. Like, obviously there's other guys who are doing it, working and juggling, but it was a big ego hit for me, having to peel the stickers off my surfboard and go down to my local beach, which is a very globally renowned surf beach, without your stickers on your board. It feels like you're like literally rocking up there naked. Like, for me internally, I was just so embarrassed that like, oh, even though I'm doing this good, like my sponsors don't believe in me. Like, why should anyone else? And that was a big identity hit. That was probably a stage where I probably got more into sort of drinking and recreational partying than I'm probably proud of. But it came with, you know, that self-worth of, you know, like, this sucks. Like, why these other kids all around the world sponsor getting paid that are ranked way lower than me, and here I am not. And yeah, that was probably some of my weirdest times mentally in my life. I was just such in a dark place, like my self-worth was in the drain, and I didn't realize at the time, but so much of my self-worth was tied to my career and my achievements and my performance. If I'm doing well, I feel great, and if I'm not, I feel average. So that was a really weird time. So once that happened, I was like, all right, I got to start working to make $40,000 to $50,000 a year as a wage somehow, to then be able to fund my career. And I did have other sponsors and people that helped me out with, like, I've been very fortunate along my career with equipment. Like, I don't think I've paid for a surfboard since I was like 12 years old. No, probably 10. I'm like 31 right now. So for 21 years, I haven't spent a cent on a surfboard. Maybe one or two I've bought from certain shapers that I wanted to board, but from this being a little bit of a documentary, I just want to say a big shout out and a thank you to Chili Surfboards. I got sponsored by Chili Surfboards when I was about 11 till I was like 17. I was with them, which was such an amazing experience. I used to work in their factory, sweeping the boards up, and learn a lot about surfboards next to James Chili. When he'd make my boards, I'd be in there sweeping the factory and learn a lot about design and a lot about surfboards, which was really cool. I developed the Grom model surfboard with him, which was really cool. He's one of, you know, a very well-renowned shaper, and to co-design a board model at like 15 was really cool. I then changed to Simon Anderson Surfboards, who's a local hero here in North Narrabeen and global surf legend. He invented the 3-fin surfboard. And he's a board shaper as well as a world tour surfer. He won bells. He's an icon of the sport. And when I was leaving Chili Surfboards, he offered me a sponsorship, as well as another shaper, Mauricio Gill, which I'll come back to that later. But I did I changed over to Simon Anderson Surfboards, and I did probably 17 till 24 with Simon. And he was incredible. Same thing. I got a signature board model with him. He's one of the most renowned shapers of all time, and he's never done a signature model with anyone except for me, which is pretty cool. And at Narrabeen, our local surf break, he'd watch me surf every day because he's always surfing there. And then, he mentored me and taught me a lot about surfboards. And same thing, I had this beautiful relationship with him, and we created a board model. So at Narrabeen, the right-handers in the corner is called the alley. Alley rights is what we call it. So our board model was called the alley model, which is where I grew up surfing, where I learned all my stuff, where he grew up surfing. So it's pretty cool to have a model that said the alley CC, Cooper Chapman XSA on the logo, which that was really cool. And then Simon kind of was pulling back his shaping a little bit. And then I moved to this other guy, Mauricio Gill, this Brazilian guy who lives here in Australia. He's a beautiful man. And he supported the last part of my career and still makes me boards, makes my dad's boards, makes my little sister's boards. So yeah, it's been cool. I've never had to buy equipment. Same thing with like wetsuits from Rip Curl to wetsuits from Hurley, to then even when I lost Hurley, had other brands that kind of helped me out because I was, on the global stage, I'd get looked after by different brands. So equipment wise and stuff, there were some perks that I, didn't have all the expenses, but from a travel and funding point of view, I didn't. So the first thing that I started to do for work was worked at Manly Surf School. Matty Granger from Manly Surf School has been an incredible supporter of my career. He basically, my first ever surf lessons were with him at Palm Beach when I was like 9 years old. And then throughout my teen years, a lot of the competitions were run by him. So I was always very close with Matt Granger and Manly Surf School. He then started to do a lot of coaching with the young advanced kids. So he was my coach through my teen years and my early 20s. And then I lost my sponsor and I was like, who do I go to help me out here? And I went to him and he was incredible. He coached me for free for these couple years while also giving me employment. So I used to work at Manly Surf School down at Manly, or in their school programs down at Long Reef. And yeah, that was kind of when I was ever at home. I was 4 or 5 days a week going down at 7 o'clock, getting all the boards out of the back of the thing, pushing kids into waves and teaching surf school which was epic for a while, but it was also a weird transition because I went from like, hey, I'm getting this money in my bank account for just going surfing to now I'm teaching it and flogging my body for, 40 hours a week to get a smaller paycheck than I did just to go surfing all week. And then you just don't really want to go surfing at the end of the day. So ever since that year, my ranking dropped slowly from like 23rd on that tour to like 40th the next year to like 45th to like 60th to like 80th, which still is like the top 100 surfers in the world. But yeah, ever since I lost that sponsorship and had to work full time, everything dwindled. But I did like a year or two with Maddie, or a year probably doing that. But then I was kind of like, I needed to do something different so that I wanted to go surfing more so I could continue that. So I started working for another friend of mine. His name's Nick Abba, Lux Landscapes here on the Northern Beaches, and did a bunch of landscaping at the time as well. Me and him were mad golf mates. So I love my golf, and me and him used to play golf all the time. And he's like, "I'll look after you. I'll give you a good $30 an hour and as much work as you need, and you can travel flexibly as well," as what Matty Granger did too. So big shout out to those guys. And I did that for a while, and for about 8 months or maybe a year, I worked with my friend doing landscaping, which was good fun, but same thing, just kind of was flogging my body, and I was like, oh, I need to do something different. So then I got into doing building. So I was with another local family friend, Denny Shallis, and he took me on the work side as a builder, and I was kind of like, maybe this will be my transition after surfing. But also through this time, I was doing little bits and pieces with Manly Surf School, running advanced surf coaching. I'd do like the building, but then on the weekends do some advanced surf camps like Cooper Chapman and Manly Surf School present. And by doing these surf camps, I was taking kids through like advanced stuff that I'm like doing on the, high-end tours. And during one of the camps, I took them all through like a mindfulness and meditation technique, as well as nutrition and all these things that I've been learning through my career as a surfer that had a big effect on me. And during these surf camps, after the camps, the parents started to say to me and my dad, like, oh, the kids really love the mindfulness and meditation. I was like, oh, that's interesting. I'm going to backtrack real quickly because I forgot a crucial part of the story. And it'll jump straight back into after where I'm at right now. But when I was going through this time of really struggling with my identity, loss of sponsorship, working at Manly Surf School, the Olympics got announced the Olympics announced surfing in it in Tokyo. And I'm at this stage kind of, going through my drinking and partying stage pretty big. But I get an email from Surfing Australia going like, hey, you've been selected as one of the potentials for the Olympics in 4 years in Japan. We're bringing the top 10 male surfers, the top 6 female surfers in Australia to a training camp at Surfing Australia. The Australian Olympic Committee is going to come. It's going to be a 3-day camp to understand what the next 4 years look like as you all prepare to try and qualify for this team. I knew that I probably wasn't going to go to the Olympics. I reckon I was the 10th guy that snuck his foot in the door because I did really well in an event at the same spot where the Olympics was the year before in Japan. So I'm like, go to this training camp, self-worth's in the drain at this stage. I'm like, oh, this is fuck surfing, all this shit. Sorry if I can't swear.
No,
cut it
go
out.
for it.
And so I get there and my mindset starts to switch a little bit. It was epic. We had like Kathy Freeman did a talk to us. We had like Ken Wallace, another Olympic gold medalist, all these epic talks. And one of the guys there who did a talk for us, his name's Ben Crow, and he used to work for Nike over in the States as an Aussie guy, but then he came back and started working with high-end athletes in mindset and identity. He worked with Ash Barty, worked with Steph Gilmore, works with Molly Picklum, who just won a world title. He's epic. And at that training camp, I remember in one of the things that we did, he said, pro surfing's what you guys do, but it's not who you are. And that was the first time I started to think a little bit deeper, about 21, 22 at this stage. And then later, the sports psychologist at Surfing Australia put up on the board, I want everyone to come up with their personal philosophy by the end of this training camp. And I don't know how many of the other surfers did, but we got these sick leather-bound Olympics books with the stamp with the Olympics crest, and Surfing Australia is like, cool, I've still got it. And I've still got all the notes from it. And I remember I wrote down my philosophy. I sat there and scratched my head overnight about it. And I wrote down, through hard work, dedication, and passion, being a positive influence to my peers and younger generations. And that was kind of the catalyst for me to start to reflect and be like, maybe I'm more than just this surfer. Maybe I can be like a positive influence to my peers and younger generations. And at that stage, I didn't know what it was going to be. I hadn't even thought about what I'll go on to start, what I started with my business. And yeah, so I started to think about this philosophy, and then I spoke to my sports psych, Jason Patchell from Surfing Australia, at that camp too, and telling me I was feeling like kind of pretty down and depressed and self-worth's in the drain. I got no sponsor. I got no like future in surfing. What am I doing? Who am I? And he said, like, I want you to stop basing your self-worth and identity on your career and achievements, because there's going to be ups and downs. It's going to be a roller coaster. And if you base your self-worth and identity and self-esteem on that, then you're always going to be on this roller coaster. And he said, what I want you to try and do is start trying to base your self-worth on how well you can live to your values. And I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, what are your values? And I kind of couldn't really tell him at that stage. And he said, I want you to go and read a bunch of books, watch documentaries, learn about a lot of other top athletes and the journey they've been on. And you'll see that a lot of them find their values through their story. And find the values that you see in their story that you want to add to yours. And it sent me on a journey through my 20s while, doing this work on the job side and all this other stuff. I got really into self-development. I was like, if I can't train in the surf and in the gym like maybe the other surfers, maybe I can train like my mindset. And I was really curious about mindset, read a lot of books about psychology. And then fast forward to where I was before, I'd run this training camp and I was learning all this stuff about psychology and did this training camp. The kids were like, oh, Cooper's really good at talking about meditation and mindfulness, and like the kids really like that. It helped them. And then fast forward about 6 months later, and we're sitting around this dinner table that I can see right now behind the camera, and my family would sit around the dinner table every single night. And I remember sitting around the dinner table after I just got home from America. I went over and got to surf Kelly Slater's wave pool for 3 days with Surfing Australia, which was epic. I got to take my dad on the trip, which was cool, like very exclusive to get to surf the wave pool over there. And I'd come home and had like such an amazing trip, and we're sitting around the dinner table on this big high, and my little sister looked really upset, Sophia, my youngest one. And my sister had some friends pass away from a car crash, or one friend passed away from a car crash, and that was pretty tough for her. But then later in the year, we were sitting around the dinner table and she looked upset this night, and I was like, what's wrong? And she didn't want to answer and shrugged it off, and eventually she let us know that one of the boys in her school had taken his life. And it kind of rattled her obviously, but it rattled me, because I was sitting there going like, I just got home from traveling the world surfing, like my life's so epic, and then there's kids in my local area that are struggling with so much with what's going on up here, that they're doing, the unthinkable. And, it made me reflect on losing an uncle, my dad struggling. I understood that it's a possibility, but I didn't realize how, prevalent it was in young people. And I looked up some stats that night and went like, wow, this is like a really big issue. And I thought to myself, like, a few things that night. I remember my dad saying to me, like, maybe you can go and talk to kids at school and maybe it'll help them. Like, remember at the training camps that you were doing, the parents all said you were really good at talking to the kids about, some of these mental health things. And it was a spark of, the next 7 years of my life of this journey I've gone on with my business. So I thought about it a bit more that night. Maybe I can go and talk to these kids. Like, I never learned any of this stuff that I've been on this curious journey around mental health at school. Maybe I can talk to them. And I remember if I was at school and a young pro surfer came and spoke to me, then I'd probably listen to it more than if, someone else came and spoke about mental illness. And I called an old school teacher mate of mine that next morning. His name's Woody, and he was like a really young teacher when I was in year 12. He taught my sport and rec TAFE course that I did, and we just played sport the whole time. He was a legend. We just became mates. And then we stayed mates after, like, and I called him and I was like, mate, did you hear about the suicide at the school around the corner? He's like, yeah, man, so tragic. And I was like, I've got this idea, like, can we go catch up at the Colorado and have a beer and I'll run you through it? And he's like, yeah, I'm free tomorrow, Arvo, come meet me there at 4. And I was like, sweet. Go and have a beer with him. And I was like, so, like, I do all these training camps and I've learned all these really valuable things, and like, do you reckon maybe I could come and do a workshop with some of the students at Narrabeen, and maybe it'll help one of them? Like, if I could help one kid, not happen what happened at that other school, or even just made his day a little bit better, or her day a little bit better, that'd be amazing, man. And he was like, oh, you're such a good human for wanting to come and do that. Like, you should call it the Good Human Factory. Kids come to your workshops and they leave a little bit better of a human, like a factory. And I was like, oh yeah, that's really cool. And obviously my name's Cooper, and I'd always sign my name Cooper with a smiley under the OO. So when he said the Good Human Factor, I was like, oh, I could make the logo the word good with a smiley under the OO, and that's where my logo, the Good Human Factory, came from, and why the logo is like that. So a little behind the scenes. But he was like, this was in November of 2018, and he's like, look, go to Hawaii for your surf comps you're about to leave for, come back and put together a little keynote presentation. Didn't even know what that was back then. Put together a PowerPoint, and I'll organize, one class of 20 students to come and have a chat to them. And he also was a very entrepreneurial teacher. He had like a mental health first aid thing. He had all these things going on the side. And he said to me, also, not that you're probably even thinking about the money of it. If you are good at public speaking, it's actually quite a lucrative thing if you're good at it. Like schools have budget to spend on stuff like this too. And I was like, oh, okay, this could be a cool thing to balance. Instead of having to work on the work site, maybe I can get into this speaking as well. And so I come back in 2019, I put together this PowerPoint that would have failed a year 6 assignment on clip art. Like, it was terrible. But I gave it a go, and I just had a chat to the students. I was looking back at the presentation the whole time, like, and it was average, but a few of the students came up and said, like, oh, that was really cool. Like, I learned a few things. And funnily enough, one of the students in that room, because this was 7 years ago now, 6 years ago, 2019, 7 years ago, one of the students in that room is a good friend of my little sister's, and I was over at a Fisher concert in New Zealand a few days ago, and he works on super yachts now, and he came to the Fisher concert because he was in New Zealand with the super yacht, and we're having a chat, and I was telling him about like what I've been up to, and I was asking him what he's been up to, and I was telling him about the Good Human Factor. He's like, I was in your first ever session. And I was like, no way. And he's like, yeah, I still remember what you told me about gratitude and this and that, and I still practice exactly what you taught me still 7 years later. And I'm like, that's so cool to know that my first shittest one ever still had an impact on someone. And like the journey I've been on now, I've spoken to over 50,000 students at schools all around the country. I've, spoken on some big stages, and I'll take you guys, where are we at on time? Can I keep going a little bit?
We're cruisy.
How are we going for time?
We're
for you guys, we're cruising? Okay.
It's more just you.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I'll go through the story of the Good Human Factor then. So 2019, still working full time as a tradie, surfing full time in between in my travel, and trying to build this Good Human Factory thing. So the first year I did like 1 or 2 workshops at Narrabeen, like no, not paid or anything, and then one for a local footy club, the Manly Warringah Touch footy team, and they were they went okay, but not that good. And then I was just so busy that I couldn't really have time to do anything. And then 2020 came around, I'm doing my tour for surfing, COVID hits, all of the surf comps get cancelled. JobKeeper comes in, and because my ABN, I'm like a surfer and kind of all these things, and my surf comps are cancelled, I qualify for JobKeeper. And my accountant said to me, why don't you spend like 2 months building the Good Human Factory a little bit more, and you can get your $700 a week from JobKeeper, when, none of us knew what was going to come. And by chance, I just had this crazy opportunity to move to Byron Bay for that 2 months with a few friends. And I was like, all right, I'm going to move to Byron. I can't do workshops, so let me build other stuff. So I'd studied a few short courses in wellbeing, and I'd launched Good Humans podcast by then in May 2020. And I was like, maybe I can learn all these great things from all these interesting people and then decipher the information, and then I can use it in my workshops. So 2020 through COVID times was like a lot of study. I built an ambassador program. I wanted to expand my reach by talking to interesting people, and brought together all these cool athletes. I launched like merchandise so I could spread the message, and kind of diversified what the Good Human Factory was from just like these workshops to a whole bunch of other things. 2021 comes around, and at this stage I moved to Kingscliff from Byron because I'm training at Surfing Australia's training centre like full time at this stage, while on JobKeeper for the rest of the end of that year, and then getting by with a couple little social media jobs. 2021 comes around, I was like, all right, I'm going to give it another crack with the surfing. I'm probably the fittest, the healthiest I've ever been. I'm training full time at the centre. I'm on scholarship. Like, here's my year for surfing. But the Good Human Factory was building a little bit, and I was like, this is kind of fun, and maybe some opportunities are rising. Like, this is maybe my pathway eventually out of surfing. And then I do the regional tour for surfing in Australia, and I end up getting 11th on the regional tour, and the top 10 qualify for the international weird hybrid tour that they did in 2021 because of COVID travel restrictions. They had to only do 4 events. I missed out by 1 spot. And I was like, you know what? This is a sign from the universe. Focus on the Good Human Factory. All good. International surf career's done. I've had a pretty good career. I wish I did a little bit better, but hey, I get a phone call. Matt Banting, my biggest rival through my junior years. He had a great career. He made the world tour. He had a far more successful career than me, but he was having a bit of a comeback after some injuries that year too. And he had another injury. And 2 weeks before, he had pulled out. And I get a call from the WSL, hey, if you want to go on this tour, you've got a spot. You've got to get your vaccinations. You've got to be in the US Open in America in 3 weeks. And then you're on the road for 2.5 months to go US Open America, Huntington Beach, LA, straight to Portugal, Ericeira for another event, straight to the south of France in Hosca for an event, and then straight to Hawaii for an event in Haleiwa, Sunset Beach, one of the two. Anyway, so I had a few workshops booked in. I had to cancel my workshops that I booked in my business is getting momentum here, and I just pulled the handbrake. So it was like a big decision at this stage. Had to like reach out to different people. I had no sponsorship. I couldn't afford to do it. So luckily, a friend of mine owns appliances online, big appliance store, and he was very kind to give me like $10,000 to help me get around for my travel. And yeah, went on this trip around the world and put my business on hold at the end of 2021. And another major thing that happened there, when I was in Portugal, I met my now partner, who is going to probably be my forever partner, which has been amazing. We did like 3 days in Portugal and got along well, and I was like, this is a fun Euro fling. And then I went to my next event in France, and she was in Paris for some modeling work, and she was like, oh, I'll get the train down and visit you if you want to see me. I'd love to catch up with you again. And I was like, yeah, do it. So she came and stayed for like a week with me and all the crew that I was traveling with. My mate Connor O'Leary won the event in Hossegor that day, so we just had this like epic this epic like week together with this Brazilian girl who, Carolina, who's now my longtime partner. And then I was like, I won't see this girl again, and finished that tour. I came home, and I knew that was the end of my surf career internationally. I was like, you know what, I'm pretty done. I'm kind of slowly moving backwards in my business and moving forward. It's good human factory time. So 2022, I like moved further north to from Kingscliff to Mermaid Beach, and was like, all right, this is good human factory time. But at the time, it wasn't making me enough money to be a full-time thing at all. I was working, packing boxes at my mate's motorbike brand, Fist. So I'd like go pack boxes, and they really helped me out with my merch. They would let me run my merch out of their place. In that 21 time where I went overseas for 4 months, they would send all my merch for me, any orders I got, which was very kind of them to help me out. Shout out to Sammy Moore and Joel McDonald. They taught me a lot about business too. And then 2022, I was like, all right, I'm kind of more all in the surfing. I did the regional tour and had a few results, but was like, yeah, I'm done. By about 2023 was where the Good Human Factory really started to take off, where it started with high school workshops quite a bit. And that was like my main thing, all right, high school. But all the teachers started to say to me like, hey, I really needed that workshop too. And I talk about very core and simple themes around the values that I got told to go and explore your values by my psychologist. That 6 years of values searching, I pulled out 5 that I think are fundamental for good mental health. And those 5 are responsibility. We can't be the victim. We have to take responsibility for our life. Gratitude, I've talked about gratitude briefly throughout this. My dad's biggest motto is appreciation, not expectation. When we look for the positives rather than the negatives, our life gets brighter. The next one's empathy, having connection with people, being able to, be able to see through another lens. Mindfulness, the ability to be present and actually right here, not stuck up in your head always. And then kindness to yourself, others, and the environment. So they're the themes that I was teaching students, but all the teachers were like, I really needed that. I needed those exercises. I needed those expert science tips from your podcast that you show in your workshops. So then I started to do a few teacher workshops, and then that turned into a few corporate opportunities. And I was very lucky to have a bit of a relationship with Apple through some stuff I did with their surf app on the Apple Watch. And they invited me to speak at a conference with them to Telstra. It was like Apple got a half an hour keynote slot to talk to Telstra about their new products. And they were like, hey, we want to do it with you, talking about the watch thing and mental health. And so that was a really cool opportunity to, so I've worked with Apple and Telstra. Same, I've got some contacts at Red Bull, and they got me to do a big workshop with all of their staff. I've done stuff with like Westpac now. I've done all these crazy different corporate workshops, which is really cool. I was just like a few weeks ago down with the Canberra Raiders doing stuff with their team, the NRL team, which was pretty epic. So yeah, the workshops 2023 started to take off a little bit. I also got a really cool opportunity in 2023. That same guy who owns Appliances Online, John Herman Winning, he threw a big conference at Luna Park, a 3-day wellness and music and art summit. And I got to speak there, which was really cool, with like Wim Hof, Mark Burris, and continue to build my network with all these really interesting people. So yeah, that's kind of been the journey. And 2023 was, continually building. By 2024, I was pretty much full-time on the Good Human Factory, between, hosting a podcast, Good Humans. Like, there's so many things that I haven't talked about, but like the last 5 years, I'm now on 240 podcast episodes where I've interviewed, hundreds of people now to learn about their life, from like F1 driver Jack Doohan to NFL star, this guy Kenny Stills, who's a legend, a good mate of mine, to people who have survived the White Island volcano eruption in New Zealand, to a range of health experts, from neuroscientists, world leading, to cardiologists, to psychologists, sports scientists, like every person, or not every person, but every industry. I've kind of spoken to people to try and understand what is good for their mental health. And through that, I done a few other cool things. So back about 4 years ago now, I'm going to kind of jump around just to, I guess, a few of the projects and things that I've done with the Good Human Factory, which is cool, is about 1700 days ago now, I was sitting down doing a meditation, and I was just thinking in my head, like, far out, I'm doing all these workshops, I'm telling people about all these healthy habits like mindfulness and gratitude and blah, blah, blah. And I knew deep down I wasn't practicing them every day. I was doing maybe, 40 to 60% of the time. And I was doing this meditation, and I was like, surely we should all agree we can give 1% of our day to our mental health. And I was thinking, and I couldn't stop thinking, and I stopped my meditation and sat up, and I looked at it on my calculator, and I was like, how many minutes are there in a day? And there's 1440. And I was like, what's 1% of that? 14.4. What's 14.4 in minutes? It's 14 minutes and 24 seconds. So I was like, surely we can do 14 minutes for our mental health. And that was a spark of an idea that's taken me on a crazy journey of, I posted online, if anyone wants to join this Instagram community called the 1% Good Club, 1% of your day doing something good for your mental health, moving from awareness. There's so many mental health awareness things out there. Good Human Factor, I want to be about action. Move from awareness to action and start with 1% of your day. So I was like, join this community. I'll send a 10-minute link to do a meditation every morning, and I'll write 3 things I'm grateful for on my story, and I'll share it in the community, and everyone in the group just write 3 things you're grateful for in the group chat. Started 1700 days ago with 30 people joined. I think the first day I was like, wow, how cool is this? Look at all these people writing what they're grateful for. And I know from the neuroscience it releases chemicals that make them feel good. It started with like 30 people. Over the last 5 years, it's grown to, there's probably been over 5,000 joined. There's probably about 2,000 active members right now. And yeah, every day for 1700 days, I have sent in a meditation that everyone can try, and then everyone writes their gratitude. There's been over 1 million gratitudes sent in, and it's probably the thing I'm most proud of with my business. From, I've done some pretty cool stuff. I've spoken at the United Nations Climate Change Conference. I've presented to big corporate companies. I've spoken to students, but to have this free community for the past 5 years, and to know that there's been 1 million moments of positive chemicals released in people's bodies because of this weird idea I had at a moment meditating is pretty cool. And it also kind of is where my book came from. So I got an opportunity back in mid 2024. I'd been building this momentum. I'd doing these workshops, doing a lot of school stuff. The podcast is growing. So I was getting a bit of a profile in the wellness space. And I got approached by a publishing company called Wiley Publishing, and they said to me, like, hey, we've been following your journey. We're trying to expand out of just business books into also self-development books. And would you have an idea for a book? Well, kind of think you'd be pretty good. And I was like, I mean, yeah, kind of. A few other people in my world of like podcasting and stuff were bringing books out. I was like, fuck, that'd be pretty cool to bring a book out. Like, I was about to turn 30. And I put together a bit of a pitch, and I was like, I've got these values that I talk about. I've got this business and social movement I've built. And I've also got all these healthy habits that I try and practice because of all these experts that I've learnt from. So I want to do this sort of 3-part book, and I put the pitch together. And I think publishing companies really like working with keynote speakers because I get to get in front of audiences all the time that I can upsell the book to, and podcasters. So I put together this pitch, and they were like, normally we have to take this to our whole sales team, but the lady who headhunted me, she's like, I took it to the head of sales and just showed her quickly, and she said, don't even worry, show on the sales team, we'll give him a book deal straight away. But I wanted to call it the Good Human Guidebook and sort of tell this story that I've been telling now, the lessons I've learned, and how people can add it to their lives. And they said, we want to call it the 1% Good Club. We think that's a very strong name for a book, and around this concept of giving 14 minutes a day to your mental health. It's going to grow bigger than Cooper. It's like this concept of really helping people with their mental health. So I was like, yep, let's do it. So we called it the 1% Good Club. I got given a 6-month timeline to write 60,000 words and tie together my whole journey. And yeah, it's really cool. On October 1st, 2025, first day of Mental Health Month, my book, The 1% Good Club, came out. It got a pretty amazing reach. It's still 5 months later now in all of the airports all around the country. So, I travel a lot for work. So to see your book in the airport, it's pretty, pinch me moment. I walk through the airport and see my book next to some of, the biggest authors in the world, and my book's just sitting there. It's, pretty special. And I've had so much great feedback from people that they've read it and it's really helped them. So that's just, pretty special. Like, I'm not the expert in any of this stuff, but I've been very lucky to learn from so many people and have all these, really, really intricate bits of knowledge that I feel like isn't that deep, but sometimes you kind of need to like go wide and it spark inspiration in people. Oh my God, there's so many things that I could share that are nice to share about my story that kind of tie into it all. I'll give you two last little stories that are different from surfing and my business, but tie into the podcast. I had a guest on my podcast she was episode 44 of my podcast a while ago. Her name's Nicole Vignola. She's a world leading neuroscientist. And as funnily enough, when I had her on, she didn't have too big of a social following, and a few of the clips that we spoke about the effects of cocaine and all these different things on the brain went super viral. And since then, she's cracked the code really well with social media and kills it. She's got like millions of followers across her socials and goes super viral all the time. She just wrote a best-selling book and she's on her second book deal. Like, I love her. She's epic. But in the episode, we spoke about the effects of alcohol in the brain, and I was about a month away from my 28th birthday, and I was like, I mean, everyone who's listened to this knows that I have been drinking more than 10 years once I was 28 from my story I told before. But I was like, legally, I've been drinking from 18 to 28. I've just learned all the detrimental effects alcohol has on, our brain and body and health. I'm going to take a year off alcohol. I'm not going to drink for all of 28. And I said it live on the podcast. And then I did, a year sober, all of 28. I didn't have a drop of alcohol, and it was cool. I brought my community on the journey through the podcast and did a series called 28 and Sober. And every year every week I'd do like an update on how I felt physically, emotionally, financially, socially, and like what the journey was like for me. And that was really cool because I still get people, same thing, come up and be like, oh, I stopped drinking because of that thing, that the challenge you did. And like, that's something I'm pretty stoked on. And I like to have like something to work towards every year. So it was like, that was probably 3 years ago. I worked towards the alcohol thing. And then the next year I was like, what am I going to do? And I had a guest on my podcast, Rory Warnock. He's a breathwork coach. He just brought out a book, actually. Shout out to him. He's a legend. But he's also an endurance athlete. And on the podcast, we were talking about blah, blah, blah. And I just finished my year sober, and I was about 5 months after it. And I was like, I kind of need something else in my business to keep me motivated. And he was telling me about doing ultra marathons. And I was like, fuck, do you reckon I could do one? And he's like, yeah, you should. And I was like, I'm not a runner at all. I fucking hate running. But I'd done a little bit of running over the year or two previous to that after reading David Goggins' book. I was like, fuck it, you're a pussy. Just get into running. So I started running a bit, and live on that podcast again, there's a bit of a theme here. I was like, you know what? I'll do 100 Ks. And he's like, there's a 100K ultra marathon in the Blue Mountains. Didn't really know what an ultra trail was compared to like other stuff. But anyway, and he's like, it's on the 10th of May next year. And I was like, bullshit, that's my 30th birthday. What a like serendipitous time to like turn the chapter into my next decade by running 100 kilometers. So I was like, all right, I'll do it. And I brought out a project called 100 Days to 100 Ks. So on my podcast every week for the 14 weeks leading into the 100K ultra marathon, I interviewed running coaches, sports psychologists, nutritionists, and built these run coaches, Jydeen and Vanessa Angela. They coached me for free, legends, with their Project PB coaching. And I did 14 weeks, and I travel so much, so it was very sporadic. But like the longest training run I did was like 30 Ks, and then I did the 100, and I got it done. So that was a cool journey as well. Like another interesting thing that I did that's, I guess, part of my story, this idea of trying to do extreme things and see what your body's capable of, because so many of us put such limiting beliefs on our mind and body, and that was just proof that, you know, within 100 days of training I could complete a 100-kilometer ultra marathon, which was pretty wild. So that was something else I did a couple of years ago. And then the next year's project was the book. So don't know what the project's going to be this year, but yeah, it's been a pretty crazy journey. And then one last thing I'll sort of add that I'm pretty proud of that I don't talk about enough is I have another project that's in partnership with Surfers for Climate called Blue Minds. And I met this guy a couple of years ago called Cal Glansnick. He's an incredible dude that inspires me so much. He was an Australian water polo player, but very much cares about the ocean and the environment. When he was in high school, he got solar panels on the roof of his school because he saw an inconvenient truth and was like, wow, climate change is a big thing. I want to try and do something about this. He then finished school and started a thing called Plastic Free Cronulla and helped get single-use plastic items banned in New South Wales when he was like in his late teens. Studied and killed it at uni, and then worked for a swimwear company and built it from worked as an intern and went to the GM within 4 years and brought it from million to multi-million-dollar business. He's an animal, but he wanted to get more into doing more for the environment and not working for this corporate business. And through that swimwear company, we got introduced and did a collab swimwear with one of my ambassadors. Randomly. Anyway, so me and him were doing these got introduced and did this one youth ocean carnival. And was speaking to students about taking care of the ocean, which is obviously important to me as an athlete, as a surfer. And we were just like, we saw this study that came out that said like 67% or 2 in 3 young Australians have eco-anxiety or have, fears about the future of the planet. And me and him were like, how much does that suck? And he just left his job, and I obviously do all these school workshops, and he was like, me and him were like, why don't we try and do school workshops around like eco-anxiety and taking care of the ocean? And at that stage, Surfers for Climate, a big charity, was speaking about wanting to introduce a youth program, and I was friends with them and he was friends with them, and he was like, why don't we partner with the Good Human Factory, Cooper's mental health organization, and Surfers for Climate, the charity, and make this project Blue Minds, which is about youth ocean leadership. So we launched that 18 months ago, and it's just gone gangbusters. Cal's just like incredible at raising money. I think we raised over like 250 grand in the first year to like, so Cal can be full-time. It's like a part-time thing for me. And yeah, we created this framework on how to get students to take action for the ocean. And it was really cool. We built this framework which goes like, we start with the first of our 3 A's, which is appreciation, obviously big on me. So kids start to like learn why they love the ocean, think about the memories and what do we do when we love something. We want to take action to protect it. So we start with appreciation. We then move to awareness, where Cal brings some awareness to some of the challenges that the planet's facing from an environment point of view. I then bring through a little awareness exercise, how to be present. And then the third A is action. What are the individual actions we can take? What are the community actions we can take? And what are the innovative action people are taking for the environment? So yeah, in the last 18 months, we've spoken to over 12,000 students in person with that program as well, which has been epic. We got invited to speak at the United Nations Climate Change Conference by the Australian government last year. So we flew to Brazil, to Belém, and got to speak in front of Chris Bowen, Australia's climate change minister, the #1 Australian at that conference. Biggest conference in the world. Over 100,000 people a day attend the conference. And every country has their own pavilion, and you go and learn from world leaders and scientists and youth from all around the world about all the different challenges they're facing, but all the solutions to try and bring it back to your country. And we got to present there. So I did a live Good Humans podcast at the UN. We presented our Blue Minds workshop, and then Cal has a documentary. So he got to show a bit of that, which was a crazy experience and super cool. Pretty proud to say that I'm a speaker at the United Nations. And then we actually just at the end of last year locked in $700,000 worth of funding from a foundation, the Vincent Fairfax Foundation, just committed to funding our program over the next 2 years to be able to scale it to over 20,000 students in person. We've partnered with the Origin, the world leading youth mental health research organization, to make sure that our program's really working and the preliminary data is really positive. So yeah, there's so many different crazy things that I've kind of been fortunate enough to do over the last couple of years from these different projects with the Good Human Factor. I partner with like LSKD, one of the biggest sportswear brand in the world, bringing out our own range together to then use the funding to go and do free workshops for communities. Like it's been such a cool journey, and I'm so lucky to have I just talked about like what I did this whole time, to be honest. Like I didn't talk about the incredible relationships I've had, whether it be romantic relationships with partners. I spoke briefly on Carol, but yeah, that's a whole nother story. From meeting her the year after I quit traveling internationally, she came and visited for a few months in Australia, which went really well. And then she came back for like 3 months, which went really well. And then we're like, how are we going to get you to stay? So she did a student visa for a year, which was epic. And then, yeah, we applied for a partner visa just over 12 months ago. And that's looking really positive. So in a really beautiful place, in a relationship right now. My family life has been amazing the last couple of years. Fully left this part out of the story, but my older sister has been married to Fisher, the massive DJ, for the past 4 years, but he's been intertwined in all of this story. They've been together for like 12 years now. So he was a pro surfer, and I met him when I was like 20. So watching his rise and the opportunities I've had to travel the world and go on private jets and watch the rise of the biggest DJ in Australia has just been phenomenal. And to watch my older sister Chloe's journey to building Darling Shine, one of the biggest movements of grief and infertility in the country. She struggled with infertility. She's now got 2 beautiful children, which is amazing. My 2 nieces, Andy and Bobby. My younger sister, Olivia, she just had a baby, which I'm going to go and have dinner with them tonight, which is really exciting to go see little Cruz for the second time. My younger sister got married last year to an incredible man, Lockie. So it's super cool to see. Yeah, all 2 of my sisters married and happy with kids. My youngest sister's doing really well. She's just come on as a presenter for my primary school program with the Good Human Factory. She's a primary school teacher and a really good surfer and sponsored surfer herself. So Yeah, it's been a crazy journey. My parents are still together. I'm so fortunate they're still in the same family home that we grew up in. 35 years they've been here. So very fortunate. I've seen so many people, with broken families, and I've just seen such an amazing journey I've been on. Super close with my grandparents who are all passed away now, but yeah, my mum's side, we're very close with them, and they're a huge part of our story. But yeah, if you've want any more and you've heard today a bit of my story and you're curious about, I guess, the work that I do and you want to look into workshops, you can find anything on thegoodhumanfactory.com. Also, if you want to learn more about the story and you want a little bit longer of a journey, on Spotify, you can find, I just found out today that it's free, my audiobook on Spotify. So look up the 1% Good Club and you can have like a 5-hour version of what you just listened to today, but also going into more so the lessons that I've learned, the science behind them, and how you can integrate them into your life, which is really cool. Or you can grab a copy of my book, a hard copy, on my website, thegoodhumanfactory.com, and use the code podcast, even though this isn't a podcast, but it's 25% off on my website. But yeah, thank you guys so much. It's super weird to do a full-length interview without getting asked any questions. I'm an interviewer myself, and how long have we been going for? Like an hour and 40 minutes, probably. Probably an hour and a half.
It's been an hour and a bit.
Just over an hour?
Yeah.
Okay.
Over an hour.
Okay.
Amazing. But man, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your life story. I think something that really stood out to me was how, like, I would probably attribute this to your parents without knowing them, but just seemingly based off your family from what you've said, like you guys are big on action. And it's cool to know all the key moments in your life that you described. Like you had the moment, it created an impact, an emotional impact on you, and then you took action from that, and that has led you to where you are now. And I think it's something that we can all take value from. I know I found that very encouraging, because if you don't take the action, then you don't know where it'll lead you. And had you have never taken action in all those moments you went through in your life, who knows where you would be right now. So yeah, it was really encouraging. Thank you for sharing everything.
No, my absolute pleasure. I just feel such a privilege. I was good at riding a piece of glass on waves in the ocean, and that allowed me like these incredible experiences, these lessons I got to learn. And now that I get to like package them up into a business and help people with it, like I feel like the luckiest guy in the world, that I've got incredible family around me, that I went from probably the career that most people go, like, you had the dream life, which I did. But to be honest, I think the life that I'm living now with the work that I'm doing is more of my dream life than traveling the world as a pro surfer. Like, and how lucky is that? I went from what is already something like is amazing into something more amazing. And don't get me wrong, I have my ups and downs and I go through my challenges and have my struggles from time to time. But yeah, I just have immense gratitude for the life that I've been lucky enough to live.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Cooper.
Thank you guys.